What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Sorry for the little delay. I was having some camera issues. For some reason, it wasn't connecting to my software. It's 1:07 p.m. here on the west coast of the United States. It is May the 2nd, and I hope that you are doing well. Go ahead and hit that like button. I've touched a bunch of stuff that might be... Okay, there we are. Hello, camera. Go ahead and hit that like button as we get going today. Anybody is welcome to call in. That's what we do here on Tuesdays. So we will pin that link for you to call in. As we wait for folks to come in here and join us. Man, I feel like my seating is all messed up. I don't know why. What's going on? So, hope you're doing well. David's being... I think Jerome might be watching the Arsenal game right now. It's Arsenal-Chelsea. It is the 50th minute. Arsenal's winning 3-0. Martin Odegaard scored 2 goals so far, and Gabriel Jesus scored the other one. Hi, Lex. How you doing? Shimmer, how you doing? Lex, what's going on? Harut from Philadelphia. Harut Nalbandian. How are you, my friend? From Philly. East Coast. I need to make a trip to the East Coast, man. I gotta set something together where I can do a little speaking kind of thing on the East Coast. Maybe like Philly and New York and Boston or something like that. Whoa! Check that out. Jerome's in the house. I doubt that. I think the chat has decided that somehow they will be against Jerome. Jerome, are you watching the game? Shot love him, Harjan. Yes, shot love him. Come to Texas. I would love to come to Texas. Been to Texas a bunch of times for conferences. I don't think I've ever spoken at a church in Texas. David, explain yourself as to why you don't want Jerome calling in. He's asking you to give a... By the way, I should say, I got to pull up this Twitter feed because we were talking about this yesterday, and then I noticed what was going on afterwards, and I was like, uh-oh, this is this is interesting stuff. There he is. Okay, so Andrew Tate, in writing this, said, try the Quran if you're so brave. Guess who took him up on the challenge? So David Wood wrote, Andrew Tate I challenge you, Satanists, to rip up the Quran like you rip up the Bible. Satanists, why would we rip up our favorite book ever? And then there's a bunch of people. Essentially, David Wood said Andrew Tate is challenging people to rip up the Quran. And there's lots of videos of people and photos of people doing such things. So this, I suspect, is going to get pretty controversial pretty quickly. But David Wood is no stranger to controversy of that sort. I don't know if he's come up with any videos about it. Well, I'm going to ETS, so I had forgotten it's in Texas this year. It's not in Texas this year. Oh, it was in Denver last year. I missed it. It should, yeah. Guess it is in Texas this year. I should get my tickets now. Yep, we're in San Antonio. San Antonio. No, I mean, it's been it moves around, so. But I've been to San Antonio. That's where I eat like a gigantic assortment of barbecue. So that's in November. Look, I have tickets right now, actually. I think it's the 13th usually, and then I get back on the 18th. Memorized. So 13th, yep. November 14th starts. I'll get there on the 13th. United Airlines, $300. Dude, I hate the no luggage kind of stuff they're doing. It's interestingly expensive. That's weird. Would I come to Manchester? Oh man, that's a complicated question. Would I come to Manchester? Yes, I would come to Manchester to speak about Jesus and do ministry there. That would also give me the opportunity to catch a game at Liverpool. So, yeah, heck yeah, I would come there. To come to England to watch games. I'd come there to do ministry, but I'd definitely come there to watch games as well. What is ETS? ETS is the Evangelical Theological Society's annual. So ETS stands for Evangelical Theological Society. So I am a member of the EPS, which is the Evangelical Philosophical Society, and they meet together. Their annual meetings are together. They're held at the same time. This is an academic conference that happens every single year. And yeah, so it's usually November, same kind of thing. And then there's an apologetics conference that happens on the back end of that. So yeah, and it's in the United States only, and it moves around. So one of the things it seems like they've been doing for some reason, I don't know what the internal reasoning is basically holding the conferences in Texas and in Colorado. They've gone back and forth for a number of years now, but usually like they've had one in San Diego. They've had one in Rhode Island. I was at the one in Wisconsin, Georgia. Yeah. So it's a cool period in that November. The issue is that it's so close to Thanksgiving that if I want to make a longer trip out of it, I can't. And if I'm going to do anything, it would have to be basically before that. Like, so if I'm going to, let's just say if I'm going to go on a trip somewhere around that or fly there, I've done this. I went to the East Coast, did something for like 2 weeks, and then flew to Colorado and then went to the conference there and ended up home. But I was gone for like a month, which is not a good thing. Dude, Chelsea's not playing well at all, man. They're in a mess. So you're an expert in Greek. Only if, huh? $356 for flights. American Airlines. $355 basic economy. Flies out. Nope, that's too late. I'd like to get there Monday morning. $375. By the way, this is a call-in show, guys. I'm waiting for y'all to call in. The link is up there. Hey, you want to do a book review? Justin, would you say that this is a book that is just for kind of, let me put it another way. Would you think someone like me should read this book? Yeah. How long did it take until the Lord told you were ready for ministry? I've been going through the fire for some time. Pretty sure I've got long ways to go. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? Because I think some of this stuff has to do with age as well, not just. I've been in ministry. I started doing ministry pretty early on into my Christian walk. About a year and a half into it, I was leading Bible studies. 2 years after I became a Christian, so I became a Christian when I was like around 18. 2 years after that, in 2005, I was leading youth. So I was leading the youth at our church and doing ministry like that. And then, but I also at the same time enrolled in Bible college. So it's, people's life, kind of the way they do life, is very different. And so I was in Bible college. I was doing youth ministry, and then took a year off after Bible college. That took me about 5 years to finish. Took a year off and then went back into seminary. I've been doing ministry the entire time. I am not necessarily of the mind that one has to be ready to do ministry. Okay. Now I should qualify that quite a bit. I think there's quite a bit ministry you can do as a young believer, as a new believer, even as a young person, without taking on the role or the name or the call or something like that of whatever that may be. So those things matter. So, okay, you got saved in 2016. Okay, it's been 7 years. I mean, that's quite a bit of time. And you're my age. So you and I are the same age. The question should really be about, if you think God's called you in a certain area, how much preparation you want to put into it, what kind of preparation it's going to look like. Is it going to be, are you going to do this for a living? Do you need to go get educated in the subject? Can you get certifications? I mean, sometimes people's lives are in such a way where they can't go back to school, get a graduate degree or something like that, financially and XYZ. So I would say if those are not options and you don't want to do that, then get certifications. There's lots of ministries that will help you get certifications in various things. There's also online programs you can do about a year and a half. Like you can do Biola's apologetics program, which is a really good apologetics program. So, I would say try to the best of your abilities to serve in your local congregation. I do online stuff, but I think this is a bit different than like typing stuff up on Facebook. But again, I mean, if you want to reach out to me privately, Harut, I'd love to spend some time talking with you and maybe giving some direction. But feel free to reach out to me at info@apologiacenter.com. And I'll try to be of assistance to the best of my abilities and give you some guidance there. I would say, and I seriously mean this for everyone, anybody that's going to be involved in any kind of a ministry, if you're not a part of a local church and established in a local church, make sure you get established in a local church before you even do anything of that sort. If you can't serve the 5, 10, 20 people in your local church, you probably shouldn't be trying to serve thousands of people. Oh, sorry. Is this question to me, David? Do you formally debate people like with a moderator? I have not done any formal debates. like academic debates or anything like that, I wouldn't mind doing that. The issue with that is preparation time. When you prepare for a debate, it takes lots of hours, lots of reading, lots of preparation, and then you kind of gotta consider that. Look, frankly speaking, maybe this is where your second question is leading to. You gotta have the financial freedom essentially to sit down and prepare without having to worry about other things. So I haven't done any. There might be something in the works that will not be necessarily a official debate, but sort of like a conversational debate. We're working on that. That'll be on someone else's YouTube channel, and hopefully that'll be of benefit to folks. Question 2, how close are you to doing this full time? Well, I am doing it full time. Let me say that. I am doing it full time. There's a possibility of me getting another job, but I'm not necessarily being compensated for it full time. In regards to compensation, I would say maybe we're like 40% there. So there's quite a bit of distance to go. That's part of the reason why I always keep kind of speaking about and pushing the Patreon kind of stuff, because I actually see kind of what the social media world gives me access to. I see that as having the ability to find and reach out to a lot more people that aren't in my close circle to back this ministry up, and not just back this YouTube channel up, but back up the ministry. Okay. So yeah, let me actually, we got someone waiting. Let me bring him on. So Justin, what's up, brother?
Hey, what's up? Can you see me or no?
Yeah. We all can see it. Justin's enjoying the California weather right now.
Yeah, I'm on my lunch break, so I'm able to conveniently chill out in my backyard.
Very nice.
It's kind of like what you were saying with the privilege of kind of having a lot of the ability to have freedom in your time.
Yes.
For the most part, I have that, thankfully. Very thankful.
Praise God.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so tell us about this book that you just finished reading by Mounts.
Yeah, so maybe a good way to start it was I remember reading. We'll even back up a little bit more. So William Mounts is a guy. He edited the ESV. He basically, his expertise is in Greek.
Yeah.
And he talks about Bart Ehrman and people like that in his book. But I remember misquoting Jesus maybe like 7-8 years ago. And it was actually a really good book. And what I mean by that is Bart Ehrman is a really good writer. He's a really good communicator.
He is.
And
he's a great debater.
He was great debater as well. And I remember, reading his book. I'm like, man, if Christians could write like this guy, the way he's able to communicate, to break the technical down to the simple. And William Mounts is the same way. When I read this book, I was like, wow, I thought of the Bart Ehrman book, and I was like, wow, these Greek guys that know how to translate and that know how to read ancient languages, they understand how to communicate. What I really liked about it. The book is called, for those of you who care, I'll try to find the exact. I think there's an image here. I always read my books on Kindle these days.
Oh no.
And but it's called why. Let me see if you can see it here.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why I trust the Bible, but the should is crossed out. That's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah. Why should I trust the Bible? But it's really good. He goes into the historical Jesus, which I kind of skipped that part because I've read a lot about that, so it's kind of not really an area of interest. My area of interest was the canon. He had a section on that. It was good. But I was actually really impressed with his section on translations. Actually, that was one area that I didn't expect to be kind of entertained by. He basically talks about how like no the he says when you're reading the you're not truly reading because you have to translate it from its original language, which
Hmm.
which can be a challenge to do, especially when he really attacked people that say stuff like read the Bible literally.
Hmm.
Yeah. Like, well, what do you mean by that, right? Like, because every language has their own challenges and they don't have the same words, and so you have to try to convert over the meaning. But it was a really
Correct.
good book.
What did you like about the chapter on canon?
Yeah. So the chapter on canon, I just the thing though with canons is a little still like this is where I don't want to say where faith comes in. Well, I mean faith does come into it, but it's not. It's a lot more complicated. It's a lot more complicated than it sounds. But he brings up was it not Michael Horton, Michael Kruger, who sorry.
Yeah, move it away.
Yeah, Michael Kruger, and who talks about what's called the functional canon versus the exclusive canon. And what I enjoyed about that part was now while there may not, sorry, a bee just flew right by me. There's flowers right there if you can see.
Nice.
But he talked about what Michael Kruger would distinguish between the functional canon and then the exclusive canon. And the functional canon is essentially what the early church, I would say within the first 300 years, used as their rule for the authoritative Word of God. Now, that doesn't mean that they exclude books from that, but there was a core group of books, the four Gospels, Paul's writings, First Peter, and most of the New Testament canon.
Yeah.
And they use that as their authority. Like when you read the early church fathers, they're quoting from it, like from an authoritarian perspective that they appeal to. And while the exclusive canon is where it's the closed canon, where it's where it's just you can't add or remove, which is what we have today, right? So that was helpful. Now, as far as my question when I was reading it, and I'm still researching this, so this isn't really, and I may not fully come to a conclusion, but or at least to have every aspect to be satisfied, is why these 27 books and not the Shepherd of Hermas included. Or I mean, and I understand that he goes into the reasoning of it. That has to be apostolic, it has to be tied to an apostle and things of that nature, but yeah, that section was good. There was also a really good section on why he felt John chapter 8 and Mark 16, aren't original to the New Testament, and he actually has a long list of reasons which are very very persuasive. But the benefit of I don't want to say a benefit, but the fact that we can know that John 8 and Mark 16 aren't original goes to show like what Dan Wallace calls the embarrassment of riches that we have for the establishing the text from textual criticism and all the ancient manuscripts that we have, is we're able to compare them and see and go back to the earliest ones and say, oh, well, these are absent. Hey, no early church fathers quoted from these or appealed to them or anything like that. But that's some of the general sections that I really enjoyed and took away from it. But it's really good to you from it. It's not just for like new people, but it's written in such a way that a new person could understand it.
Yeah, so the English is not like super scholarly and complicated and stuff, is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, like you'll read some of those scholarly books. Like right now I'm reading a book on the Atonement by William Lane Craig, and it's taking me literally 9 months to finish this book. I'm on like
yeah,
I'm like
that's
80%
Craig.
done.
That's his writing style. Yes.
Yeah, so I finished this book in like a month, and so but I'm reading like 8 books. I always read like 8 books at a time, but yeah, like the book I'm reading from Craig, he has like all tons of footnotes and legal language and terminology.
Well, that's a scholarly book. That it really is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a good book.
I think you've convinced me to get this in, but I think if there's an audio version, I'll get in the audio version. It is.
Yeah, I don't know. I do have Audible. Audible's great.
Yeah, I have Audible and I have the yearly thing, and so
yeah.
There we go. We just bought it. The thing with getting the audiobooks is you never have a visual of like how many books you've read or listened to. The other danger about Audible stuff is that you can like so passively listen where you're not paying attention, that I don't like. So one of the ways I've tried to balance that out is by when I'm listening, wherever it is, I sort of have like a pen and a pad with me that I can write ideas down. I know that you can like mark them and stuff like that, sections, but it's probably better to write things down that are of importance that get your attention and stuff. Because you can listen to books and then think you read a book, but in reality you didn't. You just very passively listen to it. And if I were to tell me something from that, probably wouldn't remember.
Right, I agree.
That's my issue with
I read the
audiobooks.
Audible, but it's good for like novels. Like I just finished The Pilgrim's Progress.
Oh yes, Audible. I've read that like 3 or 4 times. That's a brilliant book, man.
Yeah, so it's really good to, for those who don't know, Pilgrim's Progress is like a fable or a life parable of like a husband and wife who kind of depart in their walk with God. Not depart from their walk with God, but depart to pursue God in their walk.
Well, he does, yeah.
And, yeah, he does, and then she follows later.
So it's properly, I think it would fall into the genre of an allegory.
Yeah, because it's like all the people. Not all. Well, I guess you could say.
No, all of them. All of them, including himself.
Yeah, Christian.
Yeah, because his name is Christian.
Yeah, and Christiana is his wife.
Yeah,
so they all don't have normal like names. They're all they're all like has to do with their character.
Yeah. Yeah, and then everything they come across on the road. Everyone like Miss what is it? I think there's a guy, Mr. Worldly Wise Man, right? Like who just gives
Worldly Wise Man.
Yeah, he just gives very carnal advice. And I think my favorite part is like there's a guy that comes. Hello. Hi.
Sorry, this is my little one. Say hi.
Hi.
Say hi, Anna.
Are you wearing a princess dress? Is she wearing a princess dress?
Princess dress?
Yeah.
Say yes.
I think my daughter has the same one.
Yeah.
Yeah. How old is she?
Yeah, it's a great book. Hi. You want to go? You want to get down? Okay.
How old is your daughter?
She's 3.
Okay.
My other one's 5. She's at pre-K right now. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like there's a guy that comes out and essentially is telling them to follow the law, and I think he has sons. But oh man, I'm forgetting this. But at one point, like Christian goes, and then the like Mount Sinai is like falling on him. It's like gonna crush him. Mm-hmm. And then every once in a while, when he gets himself in trouble, right, evangelist comes out and rescues him out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, calm down. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's a great book. I would recommend it. I've always heard of it growing up, even, but I.
Dude, I would say it's like required reading for every Christian.
It should be. It's I mean, it's been around for 400 years.
Yeah. Like the thing is that there's so much very practical wisdom you gain from that in regards to the Christian journey, in regards to the things that will get your attention and pull you away. Like I think every single one of us have probably gone through a phase where we were like, oh, at one point or another, like real spirituality is us following the law or something. And then And then like being attracted to that, being attracted to like this legalistic kind of following of the law. And then you go, yeah, but that's not the freedom in Christ that we're talking about, the New Testament talks about. But like the appeal of it, and then you see it in the book. Or it's because it's not just sins, right? Like, because he comes across certain things. He comes across certain things that are sinful things that draw his attention and pull him into certain cities and stuff like that. Like that's there. But what is also the issue is like pseudo spirituality, pseudo Christianity, or the appeal of certain things that we're like, oh, that would probably be really good to add on to this Christian thing. And then realizing, no, it's not. You probably shouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of was it Mark 8, where like you have the traditions of the elders, washing in the bowl.
Yeah,
it's like as if that is supposed to like pseudo religious belief. Look, you are a little monkey.
She likes being around Dad.
I don't even know if she knows that she's on candid camera.
Show it to her. Yeah, man. I Pilgrim's Progress is a book that I think, like, if you're a new believer, read Pilgrim's Progress. Now, that doesn't mean if you're been a believer for some time, you shouldn't read it. I'm just saying, like, if you're discipling folks, it might make sense to, a little bit into it. You go, hey, why don't you go through this book? There's a great deal of wisdom about the Christian life and the Christian walk and the difficulties there. And again, this is learning from the mistakes or the wisdom that's given to us by past Christians. But it's I love that book. I'm telling you. Like the first copy, by the way, I got of that was written in like old King James. It was insane. It was very difficult for me to read it because like after every sentence, it had like all these Bible references to them. I got it at like a used book store.
It's like distracting.
Then I realized it's not modern like English. There's easier versions I can read of it. But I read through that. Yeah, I read through that.
Challenges with Augustine's Confessions because they're always in like some ancient, old English, and it's just like I just can't decipher like the old English. It was so hard to like follow.
Yeah, so I had the same thing with the Iliad. Like I picked up, I was at a used bookstore and I picked up the Iliad and I was like, cool. And then I started reading it. I think I read like there's a section in it where it talks about the philosophy of translation the guy did. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I'm used to philosophies of translations and, Greek to English and all that. But I probably got like 30 pages into it and I was like, I can't read this. Like 5 pages of reading puts me to sleep. It really drains me. And so I put it down and then I ended up reading like a better translation of it, or easier translation, not better, easier translation of it, more a dynamic equivalency translation, you could say. Easier English, I would say. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Carl said, if you can't relate to Pilgrim's Progress, you're probably not a Christian, meaning the invisible church. That's probably true, Carl. That is probably true. I'd stand by that statement.
Or you'll be like, what's his name? Ignorance?
There's a guy in there. Exactly. There's a guy in there.
There's a guy in there with the name Ignorance. And what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so here's the real question though regarding the Pilgrim's Progress: was John Bunyan Armenian?
No.
He had YAN at the end.
Yeah,
too.
we'd love that, right? We'd love that, man. We'd claim anybody with a YAN IN last name. It's like, yep, you see that guy? Yeah. You know what the interesting thing is that. Man, I wish I knew the history of this. The yan ending to Armenian names is not ancient. It's old, but it's not ancient. It's a fairly, I want to say recent.
What is ancient? Like, how does one define ancient? Is it over 1,000
that's good.
years?
Oh man, yeah, I would define ancient probably by like 2,000 years plus.
It's like, when does a hill become a mountain, right?
Yeah. Now you're asking serious philosophy questions. When is a beard a beard?
When is it just you're unshaved and then there's a beard?
Yeah, 2 hours into it. Yeah, the thing is that Armenians used to have like a t ending. Like, for example, Mesrop Mashtots, right? The alphabet guy, the Armenian alphabet guy. But you get this regularly. But you do get the yan endings pretty. I mean, look, maybe it is ancient. Maybe I'm wrong there. But because I'm thinking 400s, Vartan Mamikonian has a yan ending to it. So, but the t ending is also there.
Again?
Huh?
What was it before? What was it before the YAN? It was cis or something?
It's a t. Like you get these like, it just ends with a t. I didn't hear what she said.
She said enema. So random. You're silly. She's a silly one of the daughters. She says like she's the goofiest one.
Yeah. Well, I have one daughter and she is the goofier one. Just.
Yeah. Talking about distracting, but.
Yeah, because there are. By the way, the reason why I say that is because there are Iranians with yan last names. Yeah. So and they have nothing to do with Armenians. Like it's just.
Okay, so it's not like a diaspora type of thing. Like,
No.
There's like how there's Armenians in Russia, there's Armenians in Lebanon, there's
No.
Armenians in Iran.
But like there's poets like Yerisha Charens. Like that's Charens. Like nobody has an issue with that. And there's a lot of those in the ancient world.
So when did the YANs start? The yan.
See, I don't know. I have no idea. Like I wish I knew that. But again, I'm telling you, like, so if we're looking at the 400s, I mean, we have for sure we got a guy in the 400s that has a last name. That is a yan last name.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's as old as, at the very least, 400s. And again, that's a really famous person I'm thinking about. That's why. I don't know previously who I could name. But yeah, Bunyan is not Armenian. We're not going to take that one. We're not going to claim Bunyan. Yes.
No. You're not going to claim Bunyan. Where is he from? He's like French or something?
No, England.
Bunyan? I don't think I've ever. I don't think I've ever known an English person with the last name Bunyan.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a bunion on the foot or something.
Maybe that's where it comes from.
Maybe.
Yeah, it says John Bunyan was born in 1628 to Thomas and Margaret Bunyan. Imagine if they were Armenian, I'd die. Like his parents. Like John Bunyan has like Armenian ancestry.
That's funny. He then migrated to.
I know.
Of all places.
But I want to guess that he wrote the Pilgrim's Progress in prison.
He was in prison?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
What did he do? Is he like rob someone? I'm just kidding.
No, he got for preaching.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know.
Yeah,
the
so
book I read
okay,
doesn't give
let
me
me read this. Yeah, let me read this. So it was illegal, like at one point in England, like if you weren't preaching in the church, like from the church, then like you could get arrested and stuff. Like it has to be.
Like street preaching.
So this is where the Puritans started getting persecuted by the Anglican Church. It was because of these things. So the religious tolerance which had allowed Bunyan the freedom to preach became curtailed with the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. The members of the Bedford meeting were no longer able to meet at St. John's Church, which they had been sharing with the Anglican congregation. That November, Bunyan was preaching at Lower Samsall, a farm near the village in Bedford, when he was warned that a warrant was out for his arrest, deciding to make an escape, he was arrested and brought before the local magistrate, Sir Francis Wingate. Bunyan was arrested under the Conventicle Act of 1593, which made an offense to attend a religious gathering other than at the parish church with more than 5 people outside their family. This is insane, isn't it? That they had these laws that, hey, if you're meeting with a group of people that's more than 5 people, that sounds like COVID laws, by the way. Like, you can't have family dinner. And these Puritan guys were like, no, forget that. We were having issues with the church, and then they were meeting. So he was arrested, and then I'm pretty sure he wrote a book. I'm pretty sure he wrote a book in prison. Goes to tell you, you can be in prison and be able to write a book that's going to survive for 500 years.
Yeah, like Paul.
Well, somebody could argue that, well, Paul's inspired by God and X, Y, and Z, but like Bunyan is not, right? We wouldn't consider the Pilgrim's Progress inspired scripture.
Yeah, I know, right? But
imagine some guys like, yes.
Has there ever been a movie made out of it, like a legitimate movie?
Yeah, that's
like
a
Chronicles
really,
of Narnia?
That would be, out of the Pilgrim's Progress.
Yeah.
I know there's cartoons.
Yeah, I wonder if like there could be like a legitimate one that's kind of like Lord of the Rings-ish. You know what I mean? Like it's action packed, as opposed to like.
If you had a
just like
choice, would you rather pay 12?
There might be. Wow, it's the Pilgrim's Progress 2019 full movie, but it's probably not a very well made movie.
Probably not. We haven't heard of it. But then again, it's the thing with Christian movies; they're very, very hit or miss, and they're mostly miss, in my opinion. But anyways, I haven't seen all the movies.
Oh, this is like digital. It's not like an acting movie.
Like a cartoon, like a Shrek or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But to conceptualize it would be very interesting. Because the book is an allegory. So it's like, what are you going to do? It's like one guy just walking down the road. Like, it would have to be a person who with a very good imagination to be able to put it into someone's life, like in the modern world or something like that, who's battling these sorts of things. Where they might have to reverse it, actually, where they would take the allegory and then reverse it into an actual life experience.
Mm-hmm. I think you could tell a lot about a person by how they not just explain things, but how they do tell stories, because it shows, I guess, what our culture would be considered lacking significantly is reflection. Like, we are so tempted in being encapsulated and addicted with entertainment that we're not making the time to meditate. In other words, there's reading, right, and then there's meditating. Like like these guys, like John Bunyan, like if he was in prison, then he probably had a lot of time to really think and reflect about how can I connect ignorance in as a character? How could I do the worldly wise men as a character, and the big beast or whatever it's called, for like Satan and stuff like that. So like you have to be very creative in reflection to really think about how to apply certain characteristics or sins or whatever it is into a story and make it actually pretty good.
Yeah. So you're right. So there is a 1979 version of it. But it's literally exactly what the book is. It's a guy like walking, and just different stuff comes his way. Right, like the different characters come his way.
Yeah, I always heard so much about the Pilgrim's Progress. That's why I wanted to get the book. I was like, dude, like I've been hearing about this. Every Christian needs to listen to it and all that type, or read it. And then finally I'm like, you know what? I see it right here on Audible. I'm just gonna download it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would again. If anybody's watching this and they have a very sharp imagination, and you can reverse engineer an allegory into without losing the contents of the allegory. That's the other thing. Without losing the content of the allegory, there's a script there to be written, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm pretty sure the Pilgrim's Progress is out of copyright, so you can work with it without any issues.
Yeah. Speaking of allegory, so what do you like? In your opinion, do you think, say, the story of Jonah is an allegory, or do you think that's historical?
So no, I think the story of Jonah is based on a historical narrative, but I don't think all the facts are necessarily historical.
Yeah.
So
do you think?
Yeah, like his kids like doubling at the end.
The what?
Like, you know how his kids double at the end of the story?
Yeah.
So like it's very obvious that it's going from
Getting assaulted.
This is live TV. Hey,
My wife's like, stop it.
For those who don't have kids, this is what you're gonna get.
Getting assaulted on live stream.
So I think like there's I'm just gonna make something up right now just to make my point. Let's just say Jonah had like 3 kids or 2 kids or something, like in the beginning of the story. Like the actual person Jonah had 2 kids, and then it was those 2 that end up dying and stuff, and then later on he ends up having 3 or 2 more or something. But the author, to drive his point home of restoration, right, makes it double, whatever. He puts a different number. So it would be like what I would say. Oh, actually, this would make sense. What I would say is that the book of Jonah, the way I view the book of Jonah. What am I doing? Ugh, man, sorry, bro. I'm just like lost. I just realized I'm talking about Job and not Jonah. Oh, so
I thought you were talking about Job this whole time.
I'm talking about Job. I'm thinking Jonah. Or I'm saying Jonah. Wow, that was there we go.
It's all good.
You're gonna get now. You asked me if I thought Jonah was historical.
I thought you were just using Job for like as that comparison.
Yeah.
Which you were.
Okay, let me because I was like way far into Job. I was making a case for Job in all sorts of different ways. I gotta backtrack here. So do I think Jonah is historical? Yeah, I think Jonah's historical. I don't see why anybody would argue other than the whole fish thing, which you could argue is a big part of the story, or you could argue that it's not. That's the only thing that gets people hung up on why it's not historical.
Yeah.
There are strange things in it, right? Like he essentially like goes to a pagan nation and preaches repentance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Jonah.
I'm gonna get made fun of for this so much. Future said no. I was thinking I definitely missed this part about Jonah's kids.
Jonah's kids. I thought when you were talking, I either thought you were talking about the kids of Christiana, or you were talking about Job. Because I'm like Jonah. I'm like, it's not Jonah. He's not talking about Jonah. He's got to be talking about either like Christiana's kids from Pilgrim's Progress, or he's talking about Job. So I gave you the benefit of the doubt, man.
You should have stopped me and be like, "What are you doing? You're too nice." Yeah, I mean, look, I could answer the getting swallowed up by a fish could be answered multiple ways. There's 2 essentially. There's 2. So people like you tend to think he died. He literally died, and then he's brought back to life when he's thrown onto the land. That would actually make a lot more sense, I would say. I really don't have an opinion on it because I'll tell you the because. Like I'm more agnostic as to whether he died or not, because of like the question would be like whatever, like it's just virtually impossible to survive in those conditions. And then he actually talks about it, like the book talks about him being drawn into the grave and the pit and death, and God brought him back from those conditions. So there's an internal argument you can make that he died and then he came back. So there's one argument that, and the other one is that, well, God can miraculously just protect people in really, really weird situations. Like it would be the equivalent of of Daniel's friends being in the furnace and not dying.
Or the sun being still.
Yeah. Right? Like, so there are very obvious situations in the Bible where we would say these are situations in which God intervenes and then just crosses the boundaries of nature or whatever like that.
Yeah, it's not a hill to die on, but it's it's fun to discuss. I mean, I think it makes so much more sense
that he died
in light of him dying because of what Jesus died. So if he didn't die, why would he talk about Jonah being in a fish if he didn't die? It kind of wouldn't make as much sense. It makes total sense if it's literal.
Well, I would say
Someone does.
Go ahead.
No, I'm basically done.
It makes complete sense as well if you consider the poem that is in the book of Jonah. That psalm that Jonah sings, that is in the book of Jonah. I love those dresses, man. My daughter's like... My daughter changes like 18 times a day into those dresses.
Yeah. They never...
She's got enough of those for all her friends who come over. That's the hilarious thing. Like her cousins will come over and then they'll just go in the room and they'll come out. Everybody's dressed like a princess just running around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very used to them.
What about the poem?
So I can pull. I'll put it up. I'll pull it up so we can look at it. Or I'll read it. So it's a psalm. Jonah is singing a psalm. There is a psalm in the book of Jonah, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys did not know. So it's in chapter 2. Our Bibles have Jonah's prayer, but it's a psalm. It's literally in the form of a psalm. He says, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol, I cried. Right, like, so again, like out of the belly of the grave. Now you can think that's very literal, that it's the grave he's at, or being in the belly of the fish, he's saying that is the grave. It's his death place. He's using Sheol in the symbolic sense, you could say. Because Sheol means pit. Right? And you heard my voice, for you cast me into the deep. And then he goes on to talk about like him being in the water, literally, when they throw him overboard. So he's in the deep, into the heart of the seas. He says, the floods surround me. All the waves and billows passed over me. Then I said, I'm driven away from your sight, which is language of death, driven away from your sight. Yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. So it seems like he's praying and asking, like, hey, rescue me from this. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped about my head. It seems like he's in the struggling kind of, right? Like there's things wrapped around him. And the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit. That's resurrection language. Again, that's you brought up my life from Sheol. Oh Lord, my God.
Sheol, pit.
Yeah. When my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope and steadfast love, but I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. So, considering the psalm, I don't see it beyond a reasonable doubt to argue for he's swallowed by this whale. He actually dies. Or it could even be he drowns and then he's swallowed by the whale. or not whale, the fish. That could also be the case. Like he literally drowns, huh?
A whale is a fish. I think
Well, sure, yeah, but the text doesn't say. The reason why the text doesn't say whale. There's a number of things where I have like, it's just it doesn't say it. I know people assume that, but it doesn't say it.
kind of like the apple for like
Yeah,
the tree.
exactly. It's like
there's no apple. It just says fruit.
Yep, doesn't say that. But what would be so crazy, like if he does drown, literally, let's just say he drowns. They throw him overboard. He drowns. He's swallowed up by this fish, and then that fish spits him out somewhere, and then he's resurrected. Right? And then he goes and does what he's supposed to be doing in Nineveh. Like, I don't see that being necessarily... There's nowhere in the text where we would have to hold to, no, he's alive in the belly of this fish. Well, maybe. I mean, chapter 2, verse 1 might suggest that. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord of God from the belly of the fish. I mean, you could argue for that. Or it could just be that the story is being put into a certain kind of literary style.
Yeah. You know what I like doing? I've been like doing recently is I like to look up like early church fathers commentaries on passages just to kind of see what they thought. I know it's not really that rich.
Yeah, I know, but sometimes it's like chaos. Sometimes it's like chaos because they like super allegorize text.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's cool looking up, kind of like seeing what they say about certain passages. What do they view about this passage or that passage, you know? It's cool. It's cool that we actually have the writings of like people from like 1700 years ago or more. Pretty nuts.
Yeah, so David says, he was in the big fish alive for at least a time. Yeah, again, that could be, that's would make sense. Harut says, from God, all things are possible, including Jonah being swallowed by a whale and surviving. Sure, your spiritual eyes have to be open to understand that it's true, or else you think it's fiction. Well, I would just say that it's important to accept or understand the concept, I guess, the worldview that Christianity is a supernatural worldview that includes God doing supernatural things. I don't like. I know what you're saying, Harut, and I think that's what you're saying in regards to this. But your spiritual eyes being opened and so on and so forth. You can be an atheist and say, well, if God does exist and if God does supernatural things, that's a possible thing He would do.
Leave me alone,
Dude.
Just won't leave me alone.
That's not a bad thing, man.
Oh, by the way, this is the book.
Yes. Did you watched my interview with Carl Moser?
I did not. I watched part of it. I watched maybe 15 minutes of it, and then for some reason I turned it off. I think I did.
Because he's not a big fan of that book that you have.
Oh, really? What did he say about it? Did he affirm it or deny it?
No, he affirms it. He's reformed. I mean, but
I see.
But I think he's essentially saying there's a lot more nuancing. Because he actually in the interview he actually broke down some stuff about what the reformers were really arguing against, and it wasn't just that we're justified in Christ. There's aspects of that theology that Catholics and Protestants held to and agreed on, and it was just this one very important point that's where the disagreement was. Craig
does acknowledge that. He does acknowledge, not trying to necessarily defend.
No, that's fine.
But I remember reading in the book he talked about a guy named Faustus or something. He was a Unitarian heretic that he said, well, according to Craig, that it's the most robust anti-penal substitutionary view that's in existence, and he critiques it in the book. But then he also talks about Turretin. He talks about how Saint Thomas Aquinas had a version, and then there's also oh my gosh, I'm brain farting. The satisfaction theory,
Yeah.
11th century, 12th century, Anselm.
Yeah. Oh, I was like, it's called the satisfaction theory, but you're looking for the. Yeah.
Yeah, looking for the Anselm, but yeah, he talks about how there's distinctions within, because there's actually, I didn't realize it, but penal substitutionary atonement is a lot more. I don't want to say there's like there's different version. I mean, there kind of are different versions of it, but there's like just a lot more to it than
Correct.
just
It's not the simple.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they're all penal substitution, but they're all like distinctive categories of penal substitution.
Yeah. Different aspects of penal substitution, because a lot more goes into it. And again, some folks like N.T. Wright, I think, rightfully critique aspects of that. I wouldn't say the whole thing, and saying, well, hey, maybe there's like that penal sort of thinking is a bit of Western kind of European thinking, because it's such law regulated or whatever like that. And what we need to do is we need to read this stuff in the covenantal sense, like in the biblical covenantal sense. And I'm like, cool.
Yeah,
like there's room for that.
Yeah, William Lane Craig says that N.T. Wright, unfortunately, straw mans.
Yeah, I know. I've heard him say that publicly. Like he gave a talk on the book he had written.
Caricature.
Yeah, and I know. I think he tried to reach out to him and sit down and talk with him or whatever like that. That never happened. Craig reached out to Wright and responded to him, but I don't think it ever happened. Maybe he does. But what I'm saying is, it's important to think about it and say, wait, maybe we should be looking at some of this stuff in the covenantal sense. So what does it look like for Israel to be unfaithful to the covenant, and God no longer is, right? This aspect of God leaving the temple in the Old Testament, and then in the exile, like they come back from exile, but then the temple's really not. You don't see the same stuff in the temple that you do previously. Prophetic voices seem to have stopped at a certain point. It's like, what's going on? These are all important aspects of looking at the context in which Jesus dies for our sins and what that looks like.
Yeah, because it's like what really got to it for me was like when you read 1 Corinthians 13, Paul says of first importance. So this is primary, essential. He says that Christ died in accordance to the scriptures for our sins in accordance with the scriptures. So the question is then, well, what does it mean that Christ died for our sins, right? Because it's of first importance. It's important to know what Jesus actually accomplished. And what I've learned over like my studies is that the atonement, what's probably some of the most tragic things that I guess you could say both sides, and it's very similar to kind of the hypostatic union you have in the ancient church. The heresies that crept in is you either had Jesus was not fully human or he was not fully God. He was like some hybrid, some more like monophysitism and all, like there's like they tend to stress one so much that you drown out the other. Like the ransom, like penal substitution is so true that you forget about ransom, you forget about Christus Victor aspect of it. You know what I mean? Like unfortunately, because you're taking aside, the temptation is to cast out the alternates. When the reality is it's both and.
I think there's a good combination. The actual view is probably a good combination of all of them. Like all the good aspects of all of the views would be included in there. That would, except like really ridiculous ones, like the feminist view of the atonement and stuff like that. There are really, really weird.
Like Craig even brings up in his book, and he quotes from Origen, and is it Gregory of
Nazianzus?
I think is it Nazianzus or Nyssa? I always get mixed up between
Yeah,
the two.
the two Gregories.
He quotes one of them. So Irenaeus, Origen, and it's either Nazianzus or
Okay,
Nisan,
one of the
I forget.
Gregories.
One of the Gregories, one of the Cappadocian fathers, but they all had a version of was it Christus Victor, not satisfaction theory. Basically, where was it Irenaeus? I forget which one Irenaeus had, but the three of them, it was Irenaeus, it was Origen. Origen had the really bizarre one. His was that Jesus had to pay Satan. His life was paid to not because of Satan, to God, but to Satan.
Satan owned like the rights to the deed or something like that. Like, is it that kind of language gets used? Yeah, to purchase that back.
I reject that.
Yeah, correct.
I reject that. It's just unbiblical. But but there is a truth to it in the sense of we were children of wrath. We were children of Satan, and Christ, in our stead, purchased us by his blood away from Satan, but it's more so towards, I guess you could say, towards God.
Yeah.
So like Christus Victor and not recapitulation theory, that's like about being the second Adam. But but anyways, the point is like there's a lot of different like atonement theories. A lot of them are true, depending on which ones you're talking about. But so it's important to not just throw the baby out with the bathwater. I've really learned that. Like, was it like Gustav Aulin? Was it the one who was really known for the Christus Victor theory? Like, was so anti like penal substitution that
unnecessarily,
right? And then unfortunately it's made it an issue of like, oh, you have to choose one or the other. And
what happens, Justin, is that people become reactionary. Like, so one perspective comes up and then somebody goes, no, it's like this, like it can't be that. And then the people who hold to that, they go, wait, you're rejecting us? What, you're rejecting me? I reject you.
Personal.
It's like
tribalism.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like, and it's like, no, man. It is Gustav Aulin. So it's like, no, the individual could be saying really correct stuff from different aspects of the Bible, and it's okay. That is actually okay.
Yeah, Leon. Do you know who Leon Murray is? Is it Leon Murray? He was a theologian, I think during like the 60s or something. Craig quotes him a lot, but I read like a quarter of his book. But he talked about like the ransom theory. He has a book that's actually really good on that. It's called I'll pull it up here. I have it on Kindle. It's called Apostolic Preaching of the Cross by Leon Morris. That's who it is.
Morris, yes.
Yeah, Leon Morris, and he had a very interesting a quote on being purchased from slavery. So you have like a first century context of
correct
when someone would like be a slave, right? And it's like obviously it's a different kind of slave than maybe the American
transatlantic stuff,
hotel slavery. He talks about how like when someone would work an amount of years to be freed from their slavery, they would have to get their money and give it to the deity, like Artemis or whoever it is, right? Some god. And while you're giving this money, you're not only are you paying your ransom, but your life is now indebted to this god that you're giving this money to. And similarly, when Christ, when he says, "I give my life as a ransom for many," with the first century context, it's not not only is he you're being ransomed, but you are now an elite. You're enslaved not in like a.
It's like a gratitude sort of commitment. Like, what would you do to someone who rescued you in a situation like that? It's like, well, you'd owe me your life. And this has to do with, as a matter of fact, my last Thursday's interview, I mean, we spoke about the Apocrypha, but one of the aspects of that sort of research, New Testament background research, is it has to do with like grace communication. It's like when somebody shows you grace in the ancient world, you are indebted to them. And by being indebted to them, you societally, you have certain requirements of you to function a certain way and to act a certain way, and to the way that scholars will put it is to bring fame to their name, whoever it is. Like that could be someone who paid off your debt. That could be somebody who adopts you and gives you their name, and that includes the forgiving of debt. When adoption language always includes forgiving of debt. That's a funny thing, right? Like in the modern world, when we think adoption, we always think babies. In the ancient world, when you think adoption, you think at all stages of life. I mean, literally, you could be 60 years old and somebody could adopt you. And because of that, when Scripture speaks about we are God's adopted children, it's like that immediately means a bunch of stuff. It means my debt is forgiven.
It's not limited to people of a certain age group.
Yeah, and then it also means like I now have to act and live in a certain way that corresponds to the one who adopted me, because now they've given me their name. Like I live under their name, and by living under their name, now I'm representing them everywhere I'm going, which includes evangelism, which includes just living in a godly manner. Because why wouldn't you live in a godly manner? You literally have the name of God upon you. You're his representative. And to spread the fame of his name also has to do with that. So it like answers a bunch of questions when you properly understand adoption. If you understand adoption in the modern sense, you might not get this. You might just get a part. Not that you will misunderstand the whole thing. What you will get is that God has put me in a new family. What you will miss maybe is what the New Testament church would have understood as responsibility or requirements, not requirements, but the responsibility that you would have had as an adopted person to the people who adopted you, or to the person who adopted you. And that bolsters and gives quite a bit more to what your life's going to look like as a Christian.
Yeah. It's amazing what historical context can do to enlighten you and encourage you in your walk with God. I remember when I was a new Christian, like on that kind of line of topic, I would always read the passage of Jesus saying "Son of Man." I'm like, what does this even mean? Like, you will see the Son of Man, like, you know what I mean? Don't you read passages and like Numbers where it says God is not a son of man, shall he? Like, what does this even mean? Like, right? But then you read other contextual passages like Daniel chapter 7.
Yeah.
And then there's also Enoch, right, which is a first century. Right? It was not scripture, obviously, but it's a very important contextual book written in the first century. It's first century and prior to that, I believe, right? I know it's like
I think Enoch is written prior.
Yeah, so it's like, it's interesting when you read it historically. Jesus is always talking about the Son of Man, but us as modern people, we are like, what does he mean? But he's referring to this cosmic figure, which is himself. He's appealing it to saying he's that person, that he's going to come on the clouds of heaven, which when you read the context of clouds of heaven, it's always Yahweh riding on the clouds of heaven of judgment. And so comes before the Ancient of Days. And so when you learn, like, he's talking about this cosmic judgment figure that's going to rule, receive worship, and you see that Jesus referring to himself, you're like, oh my gosh, he's referring to the guy in Daniel. He's referring to about Enoch.
Yeah, and then you understand why the people are having such a strong reaction to it.
Yeah, it's like, he just called himself a dude. Son of man. Hey,
it's like, no, he didn't. It's beyond that.
No. Yeah, it's amazing when you learn context, like what it can do to encourage you in your walk with God.
Yeah, and again, I always want to remind people that it's not necessarily that you won't understand anything. It's that if I said, I'm always use this example. I got to come up with a better example. But if I communicated to you something a certain way, and somebody's completely removed from our culture, they could understand what I'm saying. But they might not understand fully, like the way I'm expressing it, the cultural notions that are kind of included in that kind of speech or something like that. And it's just like the cultural background sort of stuff really helps with having a more robust, clearer understanding of what the New Testament folks, or whatever time period that is in the Bible, what those people would have understood. And then whatever their responsibility would have been application-wise. I think most of the time people have issues with application in the church, and we're required in our preaching to essentially give applications in our sermons because people are so removed from the cultural context. Like if I said in the ancient world, I think if Paul says you are adopted children of God, the application is already included in the word that is using the concept of adoption. People would have been aware of this. But in the modern world, we actually have to like explain that to people in regards to what it meant, the responsibility, like social responsibility. And then maybe because we don't have those social responsibilities, right? People just don't feel like that. Like they don't sit there and say, no, man, like I can't bring shame on the name of the person who adopted me and like forgave all my debt and has put me in, like has completely renewed my life. So we act in stupid ways. Now, so did the New Testament church. But what I'm saying is they understood the kind of weight that came with that. Mm-hmm. And that's why we need applications in sermons and stuff like this. Like somebody's got to explain this whole thing, where again they would have just known what it is.
So I'm just laughing at this comment. Mother Teresa was a monster. Just seems so random.
it
Like what?
Okay.
It's like the Keanu Reeves is Jesus guy from the other day.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway.
It's like, okay. It's like if you're looking for a reaction from me on stuff like that, at least listen a little bit, and then you'll know the sort of stuff that will get a reaction out of me. And saying Mother Teresa is a monster is probably not going to get a reaction out of me, or was a monster is not going to get a reaction out of me. I'm like, okay, man, whatever.
Yeah. I remember Bart Ehrman, he brought up something, it was in a debate many years ago. I forget what passage it was, but he says when you read it in the English, it's in one of the Gospels, it's saying from Jesus. Like in the Greek, it doesn't make as much, isn't as clear, but when you translate it to Aramaic, it's like, oh, it makes perfect sense. But I've been trying to remember what
would this be, and I'm just taking a wild guess here, by the way, would this be the passage about the Sabbath being made for the Son of Man and not Son of Man for the Sabbath? Or meant for the Sabbath?
No, it wasn't that one. I forget what it was, but I remember her saying like, "Oh, in the Greek, it's not as clear, but when you actually translate it over to Aramaic, when he was speaking it, it's like, oh, like that makes."
It might be one of the it might be one of the analogies, I think.
I thought, if I remember correctly, it had to do with kind of like not a beatitude, but within the earlier chapters of Matthew, like the first like 10 chapters or something. That doesn't really help, but around like 10, like the Beatitudes or something like that, if I remember correctly. But it was a long time ago, but I remembered him saying that.
Yeah, I'm gonna find this.
But yeah, I'm gonna be heading out. Got to get back to work.
Yeah, man.
But
it's
good chatting, bro.
You too. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
Later.
Take care.
Yeah, for sure. All right, bye.
Yeah. Diana said, do elaborate on the Sabbath thing, though. Okay, let me actually pull that up. I want to find what he said earlier about Bart Ehrman and that specific translating back. You think he's speaking about the born again translation? Tell me more. Oh man, that's not good. I know a lot of people that are sick currently. I don't know what I want to comment on the Sabbath kind of thing. To break it down is that they're working on the Sabbath, right? So one Sabbath, he was going through the grain fields. His disciples began to pluck heads of grain and eat it. The Pharisees were saying to him, look, why are they doing that? What is not, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? And he said to them, so he gives an example. Have you not read what David did? And then he gives this example. Have you not read what David did when he was in need and hungry? He and those with him were with him, how they entered the house of God, that's the temple, in the time of Abiathar, the high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat. So essentially they defiled, brought ceremonial uncleanness and stuff, and also gave it to those who were with them. Jesus says, and he said to them, the Sabbath was not made for man. Sorry, the Sabbath was made for man. So the creation of the Sabbath is for humanity, right? Not man for the Sabbath. It's not the humans that got to keep in line with the Sabbath. So he says, the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. The understanding there being, he's making a very, that he can do whatever he wants on the Sabbath. Okay. Now, the Son of Man is a very interesting way of putting it. I mean, the Son of Man, I think most scholars would take this to mean that it's Jesus talking about himself. I'm not sure if there's any that would actually think that he's just talking about humanity, like the Son of Adam, the Son of Man, that human beings are Lord over the Sabbath. I think Jesus very clearly shows that he has lordship over these things because he's claiming lordship over it. Even the way he speaks about you have heard it said, do not murder, but I say unto you, same similar kind of language. Yeah, please don't call and cough in my ears every 2 seconds. Too many sarcastic people here. Yeah, no problem. How would they understand? Like, would Messianic Jews understand this differently? Like, I don't think so. I'm king over the sarcasm. I'm actually not that sarcastic. I know I have friends who are a lot more sarcastic than I. Yes, and we don't need to. We don't need to. That's the New Testament teaching. And again, like I said earlier, like when you read books like The Pilgrim's Progress, that's one of the things you realize is that we've all gone through this. We've all gotten to these places where we thought certain things were more godly or better, and then said, the New Testament doesn't really teach that. The New Testament actually has different opinions on some of this stuff. But it's like whenever I come across folks that are like King James only guys or girls, I'm just like, you're at that stage in your Christian life, like been there. And some of those simplistic arguments were convincing. Like, been there, done that, thank you very much. Or various other sorts of things that has that kind of a feel and a vibe to it. By the way, if you keep reading Mark 2, when you finish that, the following passage in Mark 3, 1-6, Jesus literally shows his authority over the Sabbath by healing someone on the Sabbath. How was it possible for the sun to stop so that the day could last longer? The Bible says God stopped the sun so that Israel could win a battle. This would have destroyed the whole world. I think there's a number of things that are probably important in this conversation. One of them being that the sun stopping or the sun rising or the sun setting is not really about the sun, right? It's from our perspective, those things happening. We speak like this till today, nobody goes crazy. And I think one of the things that we might want to think about is that probably whatever it is that is happening is happening to the earth, not necessarily to the sun. Now, again, that would still most likely cause all sorts of devastating effects or whatever like that. This would be, I would say, like just a part or in the context of those things that God does supernaturally. Okay? Unless there's another explanation to it, which I'm not sure whether it is, where God does a supernatural thing, and under naturalistic assumptions, you're right, it would have caused X, Y, and Z things to happen, devastating things to happen. But because God is involved in it, those things do not happen. Those two things don't seem to be contradictory to me. It's kind of like, it's sort of like when typically atheists ask me, ask us Christians, how can somebody come back from the dead? And you sort of look at them and you say, by God making it that way. Then how come people don't come back from the dead all the time? Because God is not making them come back from the dead all the time. It seems to be the case that people usually miss a certain aspect of a conversation like that. We're not saying this is just the way things happen, this is the norm, it's regular. It's specifically speaking about God interacting with the world in very special and extremely rare ways. So when you say this and that would have happened, the response is correct. It would have happened if it was all done in a purely naturalistic sense, but it's very clearly not in a very naturalistic sense. The whole situation, there's a whole weirdness about the whole situation. It's like, how can the Red Sea crossing and stuff like that, how could that naturally happen? It's like, well, God's involved in it. It's not just saying naturally happened. Do you have a reference to this, by the way, Diana? Like where, who? By the way, I want to pull up another explanation to this that I just pulled up, and I think it's at the very least important to think about. So this is very interesting. He says there are many questions. So there are many questions that this account brings up. How are we to understand the phrase, the sun stood still? What was the nature of Joshua's command? Did he want more sunlight or less sunlight? Did he need more time to win the battle, or did he need relief from the heat of the sun? If the Earth actually stopped rotating 24 hours, would not incredible catastrophes occur, which is what we just asked. Background. Before we examine the various views, it's important to know something of the background of the event. Joshua's army had marched all night from Gilgal to Gibeon, a distance of 20 miles, to do battle with their enemies. Joshua needed the battle time prolonged because 5 strong kings had brought out their armies to fight his army in the open country. Joshua had the enemy on the run, and he did not want them to get back to their fortified cities. More time was needed for his troops to catch them. To prevent their return, more daylight was needed. Hence, he asked God to lengthen the day. The text does say the sun stopped. The Hebrew uses 2 words, daman and amad, which have the idea of to stop. The word translated stand still means literally to be silent, X, Y, Z. What happened? I guess these are our options. Joshua gave the command for the sun to stand still. There have been a number of ways in which commentators have sought to understand what occurred. Here are the options. The passage is poetical and not to be understood literally. That's one option. The sun standing still refers to an eclipse of the sun. The earth actually stopped its rotation around the sun for almost 24 hours per Joshua's request. This is sort of what we were talking about earlier. The earth's rotation was slowed down, not stopped. This lengthened the day by almost 24 hours. The sun and moon appeared to be out of their regular place by a supernaturally given mirage. The sun stopped shining during the latter half of the day, rather than the day being prolonged. God prolonged the previous night. And then he goes into all the different options. I'm not going to get into that, but here you go. Here's a link. Go check it out. Well, Joel, maybe one of these days when you're feeling a lot better and up for the conversation. Absolutely. I think we can have those. Yes, good sir. Hello. Waiting. He's going to have to call back. I'm looking at a podcast. It just came up because Patrick Bet David is live right now. And the title to it is Patrick Bet David offers Tucker Carlson a $100 million contract. Immediately got my attention. But the podcast is 36 minutes in. Oh yeah, dude, Tucker's probably getting. But I read somewhere that supposedly he can't take on a new job or something till after 2024. Like that was his contract with Fox. I'm not sure how true this is or not, but I think I read that the other day. Like he's still contractually obligated not to take on another. Not to take on another job, but I think specifically to take on another. What's the word? I'm forgetting the word, but it's the same job essentially. He can't take on the same job. But like, would it be considered the same job if he was doing what I'm doing? Like if let's just say Tucker Carlson just came up with a YouTube channel. Like just tomorrow he goes live on YouTube from his basement. I'm sure he'll get a lot of views. And just goes, guys, from now on, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stream. How has he been roped into a contract like that? They probably offered him quite a bit of money. And he thought it was good. I guess it was probably in the contract, and then there was probably stipulations as to like if it does come to how he loses the job or something like that. Emperor Guangwu. Yeah, but if he's not like if he's being an anchor is very different, I guess, than like having a podcast and just talking about stuff on a day, like just everyday's occurrences. Like it's just weird to me because he wouldn't be employed by anyone technically. Like he gets paid from YouTube ads. He's not employed by YouTube. He's not employed by anybody else. He's just sitting in his Liverpool. He's just sitting in his living room and just talking. Was the Chinese Emperor Guangwu talking about the resurrection of Jesus Christ? It's interesting, Dan. Thank you for this. I'm gonna look into this. Okay. What happened to all the souls that died before Jesus? Okay, so what are we really asking here? Is this the question? Oh, what happens to all non-Christians? That's a different question. So, well, sort of. So anybody that I would say anybody that rejects Christ will essentially be given. Why am I having a hard time with the words today? Notice I'm not just going to jump. I don't want to just say, well, they'll go to hell, because I want to explain why. Anybody that rejects Christ will have to pay the punishment of sin themselves. That's what happens to all non-Christians. If you reject Jesus, you got to pay for your own sins. Justice will come upon you. If you accept Jesus, that justice is placed upon him, and you get his righteousness, and you get forgiveness and mercy. That's the answer to your second question. Okay. The first question is, what happened to all the souls that died before heaven? And this is generally, I would say, anybody before Christ has there's the understanding that Romans 1 speaks about, that God has made himself known to all people in the way the things are in the natural world. And there's things we know about God, which is his divine attributes, namely his divine power and eternal nature. And I think ultimately people would have been judged on how they live their lives in accordance to the revelation that God had given them. That doesn't mean that people are just automatically going to be with God for eternity or something like that. But it does mean that God is just in his judgment, that God will hold them account to whatever it is that they knew. And I would say the same thing in regards to the question. I'd say the same exact thing in regards to the question of what happens to someone who's never heard about Jesus or Christianity, is on some remote island somewhere like that. My response generally to this is going to be, well, they will be given they will be judged, not given. They will be judged based on how they reacted to and lived their lives in accordance to the revelation that they had. By the way, I'm hungry right now, so it's Welcome back. How could Noah have populated the earth with just 8 people? Wouldn't incest have destroyed the human race? Well, how many kids and generations would it have taken from those 8 people, let's just say? Let's just put Noah and his wife aside for a second. Let's just say they didn't have any more kids. Yes, you can call in, Carl. Carl, you might actually be better to answer this question than I am. But go ahead and call in. Pisabi has not showed up, Jason. He's not around. I don't know where he's at. Maybe he's like hiding in the background. No, you go ahead and call in. I'm not going to be there Thursday. So, Noah's sons, let's say, the 3 pairs, have kids. They have their wives with them, by the way. Their wives are not their sisters. So it's 3 brothers who have wives and they have kids. How many generations do you need to get before you're like, we're good in regards to that? There you go, Carl.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Did you answer the question about Noah
Go
and
ahead.
his
Go ahead,
his
answer it.
8 relatives, basically? Sorry?
Go ahead, answer it. I sort of did, but not really in
I
detail.
mean, from the young Earth perspective, I have no idea what people who hold other positions on creation would believe about Noah. But the idea is, if anyone's read the Bible, in the specifically the Old Testament, later in the future, you have laws against incest, against like your aunt and stuff. Like God kind of gives you the rules for that. It's kind of like copying a CD. I don't know if people know what that is, but basically it's this circle thing that holds music on it. If you uh, that's what we used to use when I was.
I think most
We
of us
had
know what a
cassettes, but
CD
anyways,
is.
right? Okay, so if you continue to copy off of that CD, the CD is gonna degrade. But in the beginning, when you have the original, you can make so many copies on it that's not gonna have that kind of degradation. It's kind of the same thing where in the beginning, when you have, when you don't have that much genetic variation, or genetic damage, it's fine to do that. They were marrying their sisters and their
Yeah,
brothers,
so specifically
you
the
know.
question was about Noah. I think it could have been better if it was asked about like the original humans, like with Adam and Eve and their kids. Yeah, I like even in modern, like there's modern incestuous relationships where kids come out just fine.
Right.
And I haven't done like crazy research into this, but one of the things that we do see is when there's like generations of incestuous relationships where it's like really messed up. And I just don't know how many generations that would take. I remember watching a very, very sad documentary where it's in America actually. This like it's in the Appalachian Mountains or something like that. This guy's like visiting like incestuous like it's very sad, man. It's like heart wrenching. You want to weep the entire time because almost the entire family has some kind of a defect, like mental defects and stuff like that, and they're not functioning. Like, is that a dog?
My bad.
Careful,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. It was trying to bite somebody else.
And yeah, I suppose that might not unless there's like previous things, previous history of incestuous relationships. That wouldn't necessarily be the issue, or that wouldn't take place where it's like immediately messed up. And I'm just thinking, okay, you got 6 people who are married to different women. Oh, sorry, you got 3 people who are married to different women. Immediately, their children already start having biological distinctions. Like that first generation starts having biological distinctions. That
Right.
would have been very different if like it was just like brother and sister in the beginning.
I mean,
And
it's this. Yeah, go ahead.
generally it's been like 7 generations from what I've heard and understood. Like both in religious and non-religious circles, like 7 generations is far removed. Not necessarily generations, but like cousins, even like 7 separations is fine. You're not gonna have those issues. Jerome says, I don't see how this could be an issue if it's in relation to Noah's family. Just say God intervened and made it fine. No, you can't do that because the text doesn't do that, Jerome. So, again, let's help our atheist friends here in their biblical studies. Whenever you have a situation in which God is involved in it, very clearly the Bible says God is involved. As a matter of fact, even God's involvement in some of them will evoke natural causes that God uses as opposed to supernatural causes. And so if the text says God did it, then I'm okay with saying, hey, God did a supernatural act here. And though, natural means that wouldn't make any explanation or any, like you're not expecting a natural sort of thing to happen. But if it doesn't say that, I think it's fair to ask a question like that. Okay? That you just can't. You can't just appeal to God on anything that is a bit strange in the Bible. It's like, we don't do that as Christians. This is, a lot of atheists don't understand this, and then they accuse us of doing this. We do not do this. Right. If the text doesn't say it, do not accuse us of doing that. But I mean, previously with the sun question, I gave that answer because very clearly that's the case in regards to God intervening and interacting with creation. In this, notice I didn't do that in this text because the text doesn't say that. It doesn't say, oh, they had relations and then no corruption came into the human being because God specially protected them or something. It's just not there. So I'm not going to add something to the text that's not there.
But the thing is, he has the a priori presupposition that supernatural doesn't exist. So anything supernatural, he's just going to completely deny it.
Yeah, well, he's going to deny the truth of it, but what he's going to do is he's saying for your own explanatory power, you can say God just did it. Like you're internally consistent. And what I'm saying is we don't do that because the text doesn't say that. Yeah. We want to be consistent with the text.
Then he would accuse us of being of using the God of the gaps.
Exactly.
So we're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You know?
Yeah, I know.
I'm trying to explain it without using that, but I'm going to be accused of it anyway. There's another guy who said Noah started his family in Africa, according to science. But Noah started his family in, I mean, the ark rested in the mountains of Ararat. I don't think they traveled so far, to get to Africa. I think they started there. And science doesn't really tell you where it started. It can't tell you that. Is there an audio issue?
No. I'm just thinking like where he's getting this thing about like Noah starts his family in Africa. Like,
yeah. I mean, biblically, he's not. I don't think
mountains are in Noah Africa. Started his family before the ark, wherever he is. It's probably in Mesopotamia.
Yeah, but it have to be, well, if you're gonna grant the global flood, then it has to be, it has to be in Africa. If what this guy's saying is true, but the science doesn't. But
why, if it's a global flood, does it have to be in Africa?
Well, everyone on the earth is dead except the people on the ark. Now the ark rests on the mountains of Ararat, and I mean, how do you get to Africa? He just walked. He the whole family decided to just move to Africa and have kids in Africa.
No, I'm just saying. What I'm saying is Noah already had started his family before the flood. He has kids. Like
right, but the comment says Noah started his family in Africa, which because the scientific community claims, without evidence, by the way, that or the evidence is so bad that life originated in Africa.
Yeah. I don't know much about that. What I would just say is that the historical data seems to show that the very early human civilizations are in Mesopotamia. That's pretty clear.
Yeah, the ark was
language.
found in.
Yeah, not just the ark, like language, like societies. The earliest or the latest we can go back, you could say, is like Mesopotamian cultures. I'm not talking about like cave paintings they find in France and stuff like that. I'm talking about like societies being formed.
Mhm. I mean, I don't know, bro. I mean, from my perspective, the evidence, even the secular evidence for the global flood, is just so much that it's impossible to deny. I mean, they talk about these lost cities being buried under like massive amounts of dirt. You know, I mean, global flood. You find sea creatures on the top of on mountaintops. I mean, did they just walk there? You know, like it's there's just overwhelming evidence for the flood, and that yeah, I'll say God did that. You know, he caused the terrain, he caused the. It even talks about the fountains of the great deep opening up. You know, water
Yeah,
coming from under the crust.
sure.
And yeah, I mean, the one thing though, I don't
Sorry,
think we
one
should have a
thing, by the way,
problem.
because Jason asked a question about where does it say incest is a sin. It's specifically it's in the Old Testament. Leviticus 18, 7 to 18, chapter 20, Leviticus 20, verses 11 to 21. So yeah, just the Bible clearly teaches that incest is a sin. Now that is when it comes to when the law is given and it's now Israel is covenantally bound to God. One of the rules God gives is that you can't have incestuous relationships. The typical argument that we're going to hear and give, and which is one that Carl gave earlier on, I would agree with that, is that there was no law against incestuous relationships before this. And maybe you can say, in order for the excuse me, in order for the propagation of the human race, it might have even been a necessary sort of thing that needed to happen. And I'm not sure whether, like, it seems to me that regardless whether you hold a religious view on this or a non-religious view of this, you can't ever escape this question.
Yeah,
'Cause,
yeah.
like,
I mean, even yeah. I mean, what the as rare as evolution is, right? Even according to their calculations, it's pretty. You don't. It doesn't happen left and right. You would have to have two humans evolve at the same time with the same reproductive organs, or completely opposite reproductive organs that fit each other somehow, and then you would have them start the race off. I mean, you're always going to have
yeah, and then
the
their
issue
kids, and then
of
it's like, what do you
hatred,
do with their kids?
right? It's not a problem just for the creationist or the Christian theist.
Yeah,
Yeah, and bro, another thing, I don't think that we should always have a naturalistic explanation. Like some things God did just to, like I don't. I was reading, I forgot what that book is called. The IVP backgrounds for the Old Testament. I forgot his name though. Whatever. The IVP backgrounds for the Old Testament, specifically Exodus, where the plagues are happening. And you know, he gives like naturalistic explanations for it. It was just like, come on, man. God sent these things. It
yeah,
says that the Bible says
yeah.
that God sent these
I can't
things.
stand that stuff. I can't look. If the Bible, I'll give you a perfect example in Exodus where he would have issues with it. So when the Red Sea crossing happens, it actually says God brought an eastward wind that like
Mm,
makes this happen. But it does give naturalistic, like God using nature to accomplish his purposes. God's still doing that, but he's using nature to accomplish his purpose, this eastward wind that he speaks about. Where you get it in the other cases, and God is still the cause of it. I mean, look, the frogs that show up, right? Like they're not, I don't think they're like spontaneously brought into existence or something, or the locust that shows up or something. But there's definitely a more supernatural act that's going on in in the 10 plague story, to say, oh yeah, the waters turned, like it says the water turned to blood. It doesn't say the water turned red. Like the naturalistic causes tend to do that stuff. It's like, oh, we found some river somewhere where it has like something that turns the water into
red
blood.
algae.
It's like, bro, it says blood. Like it doesn't say red. They knew the difference
Bro,
between a
but
color
it's
change.
worse. It's like the water turned. red because of the red algae, and the red algae pushed the frogs out, which is why we have the frog plagues. And then the frogs died, and that's how we got the flies. Like, come on, like God
Yes.
sent them, like, yeah, okay, maybe these are the mechanisms he used, but God sent them, and it says something funny at the end of it when you read the IVP. It says oh, it's interesting how it's a coincidence that these happened at the same time. Moses told Pharaoh about these plagues. Like, come on, dude. Like, why? I mean, are you gonna give me a naturalistic explanation for how Jesus turned water to wine? For how someone died for 3 days, was buried in a tomb for 3 days, and then rose again? Like,
You're
can you give me
saying
a
that
naturalistic explanation
you
for
said the
that?
Old Testament IVP Bible background commentary said this?
In Exodus, for the
Interesting.
plagues.
I don't remember reading this.
Yeah,
Because
I forgot the guy's name.
that immediately would have, like, I would have gotten a reaction from that. That's why I'm saying I would have remembered it. Let me just
He has a
address.
note. He has a note in there about that, and that really
Yeah, that would
got
have.
me hot, man. I got heated. I'm like, okay, forget this. I'm just gonna read the rest of the stuff, but forget this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like with commentaries and stuff, you gotta be careful. Let me just read what Jerome is saying here. It says, Arthur saying God intervened and made it okay carries the same energy as almost every theodicy posited to explain forms of the problem of evil. The text doesn't say that, is apparently not important at that point. Do you understand what he's saying here?
I completely missed that. I was reading Jason's
Arthur,
comments.
yeah.
How far back is this?
There's a couple of comments. There's Jerome, 2 comments back.
Yeah, I don't see it. It just says he has me coughing and laughing at the same time.
No, it's like further down. Yeah, I don't know what you're trying to say here, by the way. If the text doesn't say it, the text doesn't say it. So I don't think the atheist or whatever, the opponent in this conversation can start telling us we should say this. No, we shouldn't, because the text doesn't say it.
Right.
The problem of evil stuff is more of a philosophical kind of argument and conversation. Again, this is partly why the conversation about like, oh, God told them to go do this and that is like, cool. God did tell them go do this and that. But again, you got to read the text within its literary context. I'm still saying, say what the text says. So if the
Right,
text,
exactly.
if the text has exaggerations in it, say about destroying everything that came into your path, and that's an exaggeration that was commonly used as war language or something like that, I'm still appealing to the text. What I'm saying is you're misreading the text. And then you have internal evidence against whatever the killed everything is, that 2 chapters later, they clearly didn't kill everything. There's people, those people are walking around. So I don't get what your point is. That I'm still an advocate of what does the text say?
I mean, for some cases, I'd say it is hyperbole, but some cases it's not. It's just saying what it's saying.
Yeah, of course. But that's essentially the arguments that we have internally with Christians. Nobody's denying what the text says, right? Like the conversation that you like partaking in regards to the old earth, young earth sort of stuff is literally that. It is the young earthers saying, this is what the text says. And the old earthers aren't coming at it and saying, we don't care what the text says. What they're saying is, no, we think the text is saying this. Right? So the conversation is still about the text. It's about your understanding, your interpretation of the text. Like, it would be really strange, and I'd be absolutely against someone saying, no, we're just not going to, like, we don't care. The text says this, but we're going to do this. Right? It makes no sense to say that. Every Christian and the serious theological differences that we have with each other is one about what the text says. It's not about, no, I want to believe this really bad. But the text says this. It's like, no, I don't care what the text says. I'm going to believe this anyway. Like, then you would be just, frankly, you'd be just arrogant and rebellious. A proper theologian, a good biblical theologian, what they do is they look at the entirety of the biblical text and try to make sense of certain things that we disagree over. But again, at the end of the day, you better justify it and back it up by the text. If you can't do that, then we shouldn't believe anything you're saying. Doesn't matter what the subject is.
I mean, but there's some people who can also make the text a pretzel.
Correct. Yeah. But that's the response. You kind of go back to it and you say, look, I mean, even with my view on with Molinism, and quite a bit of people will say, Arthur, that's a philosophical reading of the text. We get how you're doing the philosophy, but that's not what the text says, which is a fair criticism. And I would go back to them by saying, no, I think it's assumed in the text, like many other things that are assumed in the text in the Bible. I'm still having a textual conversation. So the counterfactuals or whatever like that I would bring up in that conversation would be one of the text. It's assumed in the text. This is assumed to be true in the text. The Bible never argues for God's existence. It doesn't need to. Why would it? It's not, the Bible is not having a conversation with an atheist trying to argue for why God exists. The Bible is written to believers in God who already believe God exists, and therefore there's no need for them to argue that God exists. So it just assumes it. Sue me. It's like you talking, and then and somebody says, prove to me that words have meanings. No, words just have meaning. We wouldn't be able to talk if words didn't have meaning. It is very fair for me to assume that words have meaning, and in my communication, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. I don't need to do any of that stuff. Or if I show up to my boss after working for a week and I go, hey, I need to get paid. Where's my paycheck? And the guy goes, before I give you your paycheck, you need to prove to me that, the real world exists. I don't need to prove anything to you. I don't need to prove jack to you. Give me my money. Ara, give me my money, Ara. Right? Like I just worked for a week. You got my my punching card or whatever your way is that they kept track of you working. The assumption there is that the real world exists. You're functioning in it. You're living in it. And the Bible is that. It's written to a bunch of people that already believe God exists. Why would it argue for God's existence? That would be like the weirdest thing. To argue the truth of something to a bunch of people that already believe that something is true. When I have conversations with you, Carl, we don't like rehash arguments for God's existence every single time we're hanging out with each other. We both believe
Or
God exists.
clarify what the nature of God is or his attributes.
Yeah, exactly. So we both believe God exists. We both believe the Bible's the word of God and is authoritative. And then we have conversations on other issues based on those assumptions. We already agree on it. So it's always a textual conversation. It always should be a textual conversation when it comes to Christians having a conversation. When it comes
I want
to
to see that.
Yeah. What?
I want to see that in creation debates more often, more text based. Because the science based, look, I mean, it's a worldview problem. Like I don't know I'm sure I've told the joke of the guy who thinks he's dead, but it's a worldview problem. If you're gonna presuppose that this evolutionary time scale and everything is true, then any evidence you get, you're gonna interpret it that way. If you're gonna assume that the young Earth position is true, then any evidence you get, you're gonna interpret it based on that way. So it's a worldview issue.
Yeah.
It's not an evidence issue.
So
But when we get to the text, yeah.
There's two things that need to be happening. There's two debates that could happen potentially. One of them is whether the worldview is true, which is beyond the biblical text. Whether X worldview is true, and then you give arguments for that stuff, whatever. The other one is the textual conversation. Right. So
Right.
if I view it textually, like if I say, let's just say, which I've said this before, but if I say, I think, Genesis 1 is essentially an argument against Egyptian polytheism and Babylonian polytheism or something like that. That's a textual argument. You can be a younger Earther and believe that. You can be an older Earther and believe that. Like it's just, you can believe it. And there are people who hold to those positions who believe in that. Right. For the same, by the way, the same could be said about the 10 plagues that you brought up. It's very clear that the 10 plagues are directly attacking Egyptian deities. When you look at every single thing that is happening, it is an attack on Egyptian deities with the culmination of the attack on the Pharaoh, who's the incarnation of Ra, right? So that doesn't mean these things didn't historically happen. That doesn't mean that. It means that God used these things to attack those deities to provide this evidence-based thing that I am greater than anything else you guys are worshiping. That's part of the reason why the text goes on to say that when the Israelites leave Egypt, many Egyptians accompanied them out. Many Egyptians become believers in Yahweh through the plagues because they realized our gods could not protect us. Their God is greater than the gods we were worshiping. Like that makes sense. But again, then you can say, well, the actual stuff happened, but there's a reason why the actual stuff happened. Like there's a reason, let's just say it's lice and frogs and cattle and not some other thing. There's a reason it's the darkness. There's a reason it's the firstborn as opposed to the lastborn. So based on that, again, this is the textual argument accompanied with kind of when we compare and we see, wait, man, these things like kind of neatly aligned with a number of things. It's still the text.
Mm-hmm. But I really want to see a debate where, an old or someone, not even an old Earth, it can be the I forgot that guy's name. He's the guy who did the IVP, man. I can't remember his name.
Craig Keener?
Yeah, no, the other guy. Craig Keener's the New Testament guy.
The Old Testament guy, there's 3 guys in the Old Testament.
Yeah, he's the main one. He wrote Genesis Lost or something. I think that was one of the books he wrote.
You're thinking
his name is on the tip of my tongue.
I'll say it right. John Walton.
Well, yeah, there you go. John Walton. You can hold to his position, which I think is the temple view. He talks about that.
Correct.
I don't even remember why I brought that up.
But you can be a young Earther and hold the temple view is what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, it's okay. This is what I was going to say. Even if I grant that it's a polemic, even if I grant that it's God's temple, he's bringing order to chaos, whatever. If I grant all that, it doesn't therefore follow that, okay, younger creation is not true, or these events didn't actually happen,
Yeah, you're absolutely right in that because it's like, think about like someone who's an idealist, who's a Christian idealist, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same sort of thing. If the person's a Christian idealist, that's a worldview issue. So what they're going to do is they're going to look a number of these things through the idealistic sense, the lens, but they already have an established worldview. This is why I've regularly said. And I know you've pushed back on this, and I haven't done the reading that is appropriate on it. But like, at the end of the day, you, in my opinion, have to be an anti-realist to hold to young Earth creationism. Now, do you have a pushback on that? It's a fair pushback. I just haven't done the research on that and the reading on it. But that's fine. Like but we're having a worldview conversation. See, we're not having the textual conversation. The textual conversation, we might sit there and say, well, yeah, man, I see exactly what you're saying. And you might even use the text to support your worldview. And maybe somebody might not use the text to support their worldview, or might use parts of the text to support their worldview. But it is a worldview versus, it's two worldviews clashing, as opposed to like doing proper exegesis and hermeneutics. And for some reason, just people can't do this well. And so you and I can sit there and then have our worldview conversations. It's the same thing when it comes to like Calvinism and Arminianism and stuff like that. It's like if you're already convinced that Arminianism is true, when you read a certain passage in the Bible, you go, oh, look, there it is, right? You're not redoing
Same
your
for the opposite side.
you're not redoing your hermeneutic every single time you come across a text like that. You go, look, there it is. And then if you're a Calvinist, there it is, right? You don't sit there and say, well, I'm going to start from scratch as if I don't know anything. You would only do that if you're really trying to challenge your worldview. If you're like, okay, I've been a Calvinist for 8 years, what I'm going to do is seriously consider the arguments from the other side and then not bringing any of my assumptions. And you go and you re-look at all those passages that you interpret differently and you view it from a different side. And maybe at the end of that, you might walk away saying, man, I'm not very convinced in this. Or the other way around. People do this all the time. That's a completely different level of conversation, right? And this is why I think you can be in unity and have divided ideas and disagree with each other because there's still commonality on a number of things. Like you and I, regardless whether we agree on the interpretation of the text, you and I agree that the Bible is authoritative on our lives. And at the end of the day, you and I can sit there and say, here's what we do agree on, that God is the creator of the universe. And he's sovereign and he's supreme. Like we already work from that perspective. And so whatever the Bible says is authoritative on our lives. Then it's like everything else becomes really fun conversation that we have. Like it's for edification, it's for encouragement, sharpening one another in our ability to communicate these things, even to understand people who disagree with us in a gracious kind of manner. Even in the midst of that, how do we respond to people who do actually disagree with us on those most fundamental things?
Right.
Like
100%. Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, I actually like that there's pushback.
Yeah,
Because then it pushes me
it's awesome.
to look. Okay, I mean that I really remember this tree problem. You know, the oldest tree. That was like when I left that night, I'm like, okay, I have to find like what this tree is. I have to see how old it is and see if it doesn't actually fit. And when I found out, my faith in my position was boosted even more. But I wasn't always a young earther. I was an old earther before I
And you were
embraced
an atheist before that.
Right. But when I came from atheism to Christianity, I couldn't just leave my 13 point. Well, at the time it was 13.5 billion. I don't know what it is now.
14.6.
Is
Is it
some crazy
14.6?
number?
I think it is.
Yeah, cajillion years ago. In a galaxy far away.
Now that's not literal, ladies and gentlemen, right? Because cajillion is not a real thing.
That's big. I mean, 14 point something billion years.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Sorry, Jerome. I don't mean to.
Sorry, hang on. I should stand corrected here. The age of the universe, according to Google, is 13.7 billion years.
It's only 0.2 billion years off from what I said.
Give or take 0.2 billion. Yeah, but these models, they're all subject to change and stuff. Again, here's one of the things. If you actually, which a lot of people are, there's quite a bit of people who are very interested and actually think, non-religious folks, that idealism is true. And
yeah, but they don't live like it is.
Their whole paradigm shifts. No, they have ways to actually base that. Why they would live that way. Why it has that kind of realness to it. There's ways to do that. Do you believe in a flat universe?
No, I don't. The universe, I don't know. It has, at least it's three-dimensional, it can't be super completely flat. But
I'm just like making stuff. It's like we're past the flat Earth conversation, bro. It's like it is a flat universe.
There's actually when you were talking about paradigms, there's actually Thomas Kuhn wrote a paper on paradigm shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, Christian, non-Christian, doesn't matter. You got to read this. It's the philosophy of science. It's it's really good. It's really good. because
But
and I think we're headed for a paradigm shift now. Most of the things are falling apart, and we have it's like a Jenga thing. You know, the Jenga puzzle. You
I
move
think
like
every
one block,
once
the
in a
whole thing
while, it seems
crumbles.
like every once in a while so it's we go through a paradigm shift. Is that at the plato.stanford.edu? But I don't just want to copy paste the article on Kuhn. I want to specifically post a link to that one.
It is that Plato one. It is Thomas. Well, it's everything about it's his background. It's
Okay,
everything
so
about him. But there's little links, and you can go to the what he wrote specifically.
I'll post that, ladies and
Um,
gentlemen, so you guys can go read this. Plato.stanford.edu is one of the best academic free article based websites you can get your hands on for research.
yeah, it's gonna change. Like if you understand, if you read and understand, it's gonna change your whole view on the scientific community. There's a guy, I forgot his name on YouTube, but he's not a Christian. He's not a theist. At least I don't know if I know he's not a Christian. I don't know. Maybe he's a
What's his
theist.
name?
Maybe he isn't. I forgot. It's the guy I sent the videos. The guy who did the satellite in Armenia.
Mm-hmm.
Hetuni
Yeah.
dish basically, which there's a lot of things that doesn't fit. This guy's a scientist himself.
Yeah.
Like there's a
Well,
lot of
it's
things that
it's the
don't fit
same
the
thing.
cognitive.
Did you ever watch that? And maybe we reacted to this with that mathematician and then Stephen Meyer and the philosopher. I keep
Oh, right,
forgetting his
right.
name.
Yeah.
Like, and that guy was like, "Dude, I'm just giving up naturalistic evolution. Like, I'm giving up Darwinian evolution. Not a theist. I'm not a Christian. It's just the math doesn't add up. The information theory and all that stuff doesn't add up with this. So I'm going to give that up."
I mean, David Berlinski,
Yeah,
when
exactly.
the ID
Berlinski.
movement was popular,
Yeah.
Berlinski gave that up too.
Yeah.
But there was another guy, I forgot his name. But it doesn't fit. Some of these things, the biggest problem we have with the paradigm right now is there's things built on top of other things. So you can't pull this out because if you pull this out, everything kind of goes with it. So it's a huge problem, and it's just a matter of time until it
But again, 100
falls
years
apart.
ago, I mean, we weren't alive, and therefore we didn't get the kind of feelings of what that would have looked like. About 100 years ago, lots of people in the scientific community were very, very convinced of an infinite eternal universe.
Mhm.
And when the data started coming out on the Big Bang stuff, that was a big paradigm shift for them. I mean, we
Right.
have it in writing. I don't know what it would have looked like in regards to the sorts of conversation you and I are having, but a lot of these scientists were like, wait, I got to give up that. But if I give up that, then I got to give up this and I got to give up this. And then it's going to beg the
Exactly.
question of where did this stuff come from anyways? So they start panicking. But this happens for anybody that's going through any kind of a worldview shift, right? I mean, look at all the people who've deconstructed from Christianity. Like they go through a very similar paradigm because they go, wait, I was doing that for this reason. Like I always tell people when they ask me, like, what would you do if you stopped being a Christian tomorrow? And my response generally is, I'd have a lot more time on my hands. And I really, really mean that, guys. Like if I stop being a Christian tomorrow, my Sundays would completely open up. Because I wouldn't go to church on Sundays. My Thursday nights would really open up. At the very least, I would have an extra, I would say, 4 to 12 hours free. Just places I go with my family. Like, extended family, when they do things on Sundays, I generally cannot be there unless it's like a crazy emergency because I'm at church. It's like that's very practically that a change in my life. I might still have an interest in studying theology and studying the philosophy of theology. Like I could still do that as a non-believer because there's plenty of non-believers that do that and find interest in that, like as an intellectual pursuit of sorts. But practically, there's things that open up. And the way you raise your children will probably change. I know for me it would. What I
I
teach
mean,
them, the way I
I'd
condition.
probably stop all that stuff though. I wouldn't read the Bible anymore. I wouldn't read Christian books anymore. I might move more towards secular philosophy
Yeah,
because
most
I still need to
probably
find
because
the
you want
word
to be
of truth,
consistent. Yeah, you would be consistent. I mean,
Right.
you can still hold to secular philosophical perspectives and still have an interest in studying some of these things as, like I said, an intellectual pursuit. But yeah,
No, Yulia, why are you a flat
Julia said,
earther?
should we be trying to get people to get into theology? And if so, how should we start? Sorry, should we try to, hang on. Should we be trying to get people to get into theology? Yulia, people, whether they like it or not, are already in theology. Everyone. Because what is theology? Well, theology is the study of God. So even if you're an atheist, if you believe God doesn't exist, that's a theological perspective. Some people might call this atheology or something like that. But it's still a view about God. You still have a belief about God, namely that it doesn't exist. So everybody already does theology. I really, really don't like it when Christians say stuff like, man, I don't get too serious about theology. I go, well, you realize that's a theological perspective. That so everybody's doing theology. The question is whether we do it well or not. The same reason I would say is everybody does philosophy. Whether we do it good or bad is up to that. So you already do it. People already do it. What we should try to get people to do is do theology well. Is to do theology based on proper hermeneutics and exegesis. Because our theological perspectives should come out of, predominantly, should come out of the scriptures plus sound reason and observations about God. Now you could add to that. I mean, I would just go to Wesleyan quadrilateral here. I think it's scripture, reason, experience, and tradition. Those four things will help you in the development, and some of those are more important than others, but they will help you in having the proper theological view. Everybody does it, and yes, if you want to love God, you have to do theology, because then you don't know what you're loving. If your theology is not good. That becomes problematic. And then Yulia said, I'm a flat earther. Why?
You gotta watch Danny Faulkner's video on flat Earth.
Are you telling me to watch that or telling her to watch that?
Well, I mean that's good to watch for everybody. He shows that the Bible doesn't teach flat Earth.
The Bible in no way does it teach flat earth. Anybody who...
That's a lot of the claim they make.
Look, man, if you're going to quote the Bible to me, look, I'm not very strong in the science area, but I'm very strong in the text area of the Bible. Very. I can deconstruct and rebuild a text really quickly in regards to its structure, language used, consistency of language, lots and lots of really cool stuff like that. If somebody comes to me and says something like, the Bible talks about the four corners of the earth, I'm sorry, but that's like, I laugh. The Bible also talks about Jesus being a door and a sheep and a lion, and it talks about us being us as being sheep. Please do not do that. That is not any evidence for the earth being flat. The only way, in my opinion, that you could be a flat earther is that you conspiratorially justify a lot of things.
There's okay. By the way, I was like this close to taking this view seriously, flat Earth seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, let me examine these claims. There's one that I can't get over. You have to get all the countries in the world, every single one, to completely agree to keep this a secret. There's no whistleblowers. No one came out. I mean, Edward Snowden, the biggest thing, since like, it's maybe even bigger than flat Earth. He came out and told us that, yeah, they're spying on you, So there's no whistleblower for this flat Earth thing.
Yeah, look,
I don't know, man.
I know
It's just too
Christians.
much.
Let me tell you this. I know Christians that work at JPL and NASA. Like, they work on this stuff. They work on sending rovers to Mars, and they've done it. Okay, unless you're just going to argue like all these Christians that are involved in this are just like a part of this great conspiracy, and it's just okay, right?
They actually do though.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Like, oh, he's just lying or something, or he's being deceitful. I mean, bro, some of these people, even if you take them into space and show them that the Earth is a globe, they're gonna say, "Oh, that's some kind of screen you have
Wasn't
going
there
on."
recently
That's some
a video on YouTube where this guy like was doing an experiment, and then he was doing an experiment about light traveling through like two holes,
Oh, right.
and then he was like, "Wait, it's curving." He didn't know what to do. Like, talk about a paradigm shift. He's confronted right there with the paradigm shift. He's got to have it.
Yeah. Anyway, bro, I gotta go. I gotta get back to work. I gotta
Go
finish
for it, man.
before sunset.
Yes,
Um,
it is almost 4 p.m. here. I should be going as well. Take care, Carl. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. Bye bye.
We'll just stop that there because we are 2 hours and 45 minutes in. Keanu Reeves is in the house. What's up, Keanu? We talk about it like it's the actual Keanu Reeves that's just joining us. Jerome, you should get some rest so your cough can go away. I'm more speaking. Okay, let's address this, Yulia. It says I'm more speaking about getting into the deep of what the Bible says. Most people I socialize with still in the shallow end, and I should be trying to get them pulled in. Here's what I would say. The book of Hebrews talks about. It says you should essentially be maturing up. Hebrews 6. He says some of you guys should have gotten past the elementary things, right? The elementary teachings. You ought to be teachers by now. And that's the way I look at getting into the deep of what the Bible says. Get past the elementary stuff. If you're not getting past the elementary stuff, the Bible commands you to get past the elementary stuff. And the reason someone is not getting past the elementary stuff might be because they're lazy, might be because they're uninterested. But what they should not be doing is somehow justifying it biblically, saying the Bible tells us to stay dumb and uninformed or something like that. The Bible does not do that. Get past the elementary stuff. If you have Christians around you who aren't maturing up to get past the elementary stuff, they need to get past the elementary stuff. Okay? It's very simple. Darkin, what's up? Seems like we got more atheists joining our hangouts. Or I'm assuming here because you know Jerome and Keanu. Christians don't read their Bibles. I don't disagree with you, by the way. Christians should be reading their Bibles. And Christians don't read their Bibles. That's a major internal issue that we have as Christians. Or at least American Christians, I should say. That's been my experience. Or it's not just reading, by the way. It's not enough just to read. It really is not enough just to read the Bible. Because you need to know how to read. Not everybody knows how to read. And I'll end on this note. If you don't know how to read, by that I don't mean you don't know how to recognize letters. There's a way to read literature. You should read the book, How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler. How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler. You will learn that different things ought to be read differently. Not everything gets to read. Not everything I should rephrase that. We should not read everything the same way. We'll stop there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for hanging out with us for the past 2 hours and 49 minutes to the dot. I will see you guys tomorrow night for our live reaction videos at night, 9:30 p.m. Is it 9:30 or 9? I always forget. I think it's 9. It was originally, is it 9? Oh, man, it's 9. Tomorrow night at 9. I will, we'll be reacting to some stuff. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Reminder that Thursday we do not have a interview or a stream. It is my 10th wedding anniversary, so nothing there. And then Friday we'll be back with our live Q&As. Thanks for calling in, Justin and Carl. Thanks for everyone just hanging out. Again, if you want to support the stuff we're doing, go to patreon.com/Apologia Center. And I should say, today, I didn't use any of the sounds on my soundboard. And we shall end with this sound.